this session, we'll be discussing the story of Esther, a beautiful Jewish woman who was used by God to save her people from extinction. Esther was an orphan. We don't often think about that. The famous Queen Esther was an orphan adopted and raised by her older cousin Mordecai. As many of us know, when the king was in the process of looking for a new queen, Esther was taken to the palace with many other young virgins. She continually received favor and eventually won the king's heart and was crowned queen. As time went on, Mordecai became an enemy of Haman, the king's chief official. Haman convinced the king to order the destruction of all Jews in the kingdom. Esther, risking her own life, approached the king. She revealed that she was a Jew and asked the king to spare her life and those of her people. The king not only honored her request, he had Haman hanged on the gallows that Haman had built himself with the intention for them to be used for Mordecai. Esther is unique among biblical books in many ways. Most famously, the book does not overtly mention God, either by his personal name or generically. Additionally, Esther is also the only biblical book in which the action takes place completely in Persia. To understand why, some historical background is needed. At the beginning of the 6th century BC, the Hebrew kingdom of Judah found itself facing the Neo-Babylonian Empire, a Mesopotamian superpower. At first, Judah became a vassal state and then quickly rebelled. But after a Babylonian onslaught in 597 BC, they capitulated and then rebelled again 10 years later. In response to the second rebellion, Babylon's king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Judah, its capital Jerusalem, and its temple. After each rebellion, the Babylonians took large numbers of Judeans, or Jews, to Babylon. This experience was called the exile. Forcibly resettled, these Jews made lives for themselves in southern Mesopotamia. Half a century later, the Persian Empire overtook the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Shortly after coming to power, Cyrus the Great formed the Persian Empire by uniting the kingdoms of the Medes and the Persians. Cyrus took Babylon in 539 BC. In the following year, he issued an edict allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. While many Jews returned to their homeland, many did not. So a scattered community of Jews continued in the area around Babylon. These Jews, now free, began to conduct commerce and settle in other cities, including those in Persia to the east of Babylonia. Primary among the Persian cities was Susa. This is where the story of Esther occurs in the 5th century BC. Susa is identified with Shush, a collection of mounds on a natural extension of Mesopotamia into southwest Persia, which is today modern Iran. This region, ancient Susiana, was sometimes under the control of the dominant state of southern Mesopotamia. Sometimes it was independent, and sometimes it was part of the large Persian states, but Susa was usually its capital. Though this region was populated for thousands of years, the vast majority of the Persian remains on the site date to the reigns of Darius the Great, which was around 500 BC, or Artaxerxes II, which was about 100 years later. Darius made Susa his main capital. This and the great royal road he built connecting Susa with Sardis brought many important foreign visitors to the city. The site of ancient Susa is spread over 4 distinct mounds, called by the French the Acropolis, Apadana, Ville Royale, and Ville des Artisans. The Acropolis, as the name suggests, is the tallest, with stratified archaeological remains 82 feet deep. The earliest occupation and most of the Elamite and earlier finds were discovered there, including the Hammurabi Code and other looted Mesopotamian treasures. North of the Acropolis, Darius I created the Apadana Mound and effectively reshaped the whole city by constructing a huge 32-acre gravel platform on which he built a palace. The palace consisted of residential quarters in the south with an official government center and audience hall, called an Apadana, to the north. Archaeologists discovered a foundation inscription written in three languages in which Darius I described building the palace by using materials and workmen from throughout his vast empire. This impressive complex is the setting for the story of Esther during the reign of Darius's successor, Xerxes I. After his ill-fated military campaign against Greece, Xerxes retired to Susa. A monumental gateway discovered in the 1970s east of the palace complex contains inscriptions of Xerxes attributing its construction to Darius. The inscription implies Xerxes continued to use the complex. As the gateway is the only known access to the palace, it's tempting to associate it with the King's Gate, where Esther's kinsman Mordecai sat. The residential quarters would correspond to the king's palace in the story. Within outer walls, this structure had a series of inner courtyards aligned east to west. The first of these served as an entrance courtyard and may be the outer court of the king's palace, mentioned in Esther 6:4. The third courtyard gives access to what appears to be the royal apartments and may thus be the inner courtyard where a nervous Esther made her uninvited approach to the king. The audience hall was hypostyle, filled with 6 rows of 6 columns each. More columns filled 3 porticos on the west, north, and east sides. The columns themselves featured fluted shafts on square bases, topped with capitals in the form of 2 bull torsos facing in opposite directions. They rose 65 feet, an achievement unparalleled in the ancient world. The entire palace residence and appendana were decorated exclusively with glazed brickwork depicting mythical animals and figures of the immortals, the elite guard troops of the king. The royal parts of the city, consisting of the Acropolis, Appendana, and V Royale mounds, were enclosed in an impressive city wall. A canal diverted from the Shower River on the west ran along the north and east sides of the royal enclosure, separating it from the unfortified lower city to the east, represented by the fourth mound, the Vie des Artisans. These distinct parts of the city may be reflected in the text of Esther, where Susa, the capital, can refer to the royal walled section, while Susa, without further qualification, may indicate the lower city. Susa's importance as a capital ended with the conquest of Alexander the Great, although the city continued to exist and prosper under Hellenistic, Parthian, Sassanian, and Islamic rule. It was finally abandoned in the 13th century, but nevertheless, Susa has been and remains a site of pilgrimage for Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Mandeans who venerate a medieval structure now enclosed in a mosque as the tomb of the prophet Daniel. While the tomb of Daniel has been known from at least the 7th century AD, Susa has no shrine that is associated with Queen Esther. It's easy to read this story with our modern mindset and think, so what? A queen had to talk to the king about not killing an entire race of people. That should be a really easy request. But what complicates it is that Haman had already portrayed the Jews as an enemy to the king and a threat to his rule. The penalty for approaching the king without being summoned was often death, and Esther was risking her life to save the lives of her people, who were God's people, through whom a Messiah would come. This is a really big moment. In a way, we are all Esthers today, seeking to snatch those decreed to destruction out of the hands of death. We too must step out of our comfort zone and tell them about Jesus, the King of Kings who can deliver them from their death sentence. In our modern context, risking our lives as Esther did is not necessary, but the urgency is no less. We are God's chosen people for such a time as this.